I'll share my screen in a moment. My clock says 9. I want to honor your sacrifice and your time, as many of you may be going into worship service, whether that's in person or virtual at 10. So I certainly want to honor your time. So I'll be sharing my screen here shortly, but that's all right. If some of you are on the phone and you are unable to see the screen, I'll talk through it. And we'll also share the PowerPoint as well, so you will not miss it. We'll make sure that the PowerPoint will get to you. Welcome to Thirsting for More, Exploring Spiritual Practices for a Deeper Communion with God. That the first song, that song you just heard, was by Israel, the New Breed, and I'm not sure if you've heard it before, but it's an old song, and it's called "To Worship You I Live." And I love the song. I love it because it calls me away. In the lyrics, it says away from the noise. And so it calls me away from all the many things that I have been gifted and blessed to do. It calls me away from my daily life, my obligations, my roles, the noise of being a mother, a daughter, a wife, a professor, a first lady, a minister, and a friend. And so oftentimes when I listen to the song, I tear up, and it just lets me know that it is evidence. My tears are evidence of my own thirsting, right? My own thirsting for more. And so it's a good segue into our time together. Let me put this on slideshow for you so you can see it better. It's a good segue into our time together. So I'll just let you know right off the jump, I am a scholar practitioner. At the end of the day, I want to give you something that you can use. I don't just want to give you words, but I want to give you practical application that you can possibly put into practice as soon as our time together is over. And so as we are meeting and sharing with one another, my hope is that you might gather tools and steps and things that you might be able to employ even today. What we are hoping to gain today is that you will walk away with your own definition of spirituality. You'll walk away understanding the aim or the goal of spiritual practices. You'll be able to identify the 3 essential parts of spiritual practices. And then you'll get a little bit more information about this practice called Sabbath rest. And so we're going to dig into Sabbath rest as a part of our time together. But let's just start with the title, right? Thirsting for More, Deeper Communion with God. The title alone assumes several things. It assumes that we are engaged in something that feeds our spiritual selves, even if we may not be consistent with it, even if we're unsure that we're effective. We're doing something that's hopefully feeding us. If it's walking in the park or attending virtual church, something that we're doing. It also assumes that we want more, that we desire to enhance this spiritual life or enhance this practice that we may already be doing. It also assumes that we need it, that it's not just a want, right? We have enough things that are filling our days, and it is not that we have all of this free time, right? That we can just put things in, but that we need something to help us survive the vicissitudes of life, right? It helps us to make it through so many of the challenges that we face today. And I don't have to list the challenges. We know that we're in a pandemic. We know that there are things that are happening that are injustices to the marginalized. We know of these things, right? And so it also assumes that this spiritual practice, this thing that we're doing, is not one-dimensional. It's not just one-dimensional, but it includes our spirit, it includes ourselves, it includes our world. And so as we are coming together, we are trying to find ways to go deeper. Even as we think about the word practice in our title, practice would suggest that it's something that we'll do, and we may not always get it right. Now, I use the word right very loosely because there is no right. Because we are unique individuals, what I practice may not be what you practice. We could say we're practicing the same thing, but we do it in different ways because we bring ourselves to the moment. A lot of people like to say that practice makes perfect. I do not subscribe to that. I think practice makes better, right? Practice can also make habit or routine. And I'm not of the business of making spiritual robots, people that can do something perfectly. But I'm hoping that we can develop ways in which we can connect with God personally, not necessarily perfectly. One of the things I say in the church right before we worship, when we're praying, I say worship doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to be authentic. At the end of the day, it needs to come from a real place inside of us and connect to the real and living God. And so as we're thinking about this word practice, I invite us to consider practice in terms of exploration, not in terms of getting it right, but in terms of how might I explore the ways that God might reveal God's self to me through a particular practice. I also invite us to think about practice as fluid, right? As flexible and not static and rigid, which means if you do something, a practice, and you're not feeling it, it's not moving you, it's not real to you, then stop. It's okay to stop and try something else, right? Things that we have to do out of habit, but to think of them in terms of our exploration and things like that. I am checking the chat just in case. I see I am breaking up. Oh my gosh, I've been breaking up for about 20 seconds. I hope I am back on. Can you all hear me? Okay. All right. Listen, I am there are trees around. It rained last night. If you know anything about technology, sometimes all it takes is one trickle of rain and everything starts to fall apart. And so bear with me. If I need to repeat myself, feel free to put that in the chat to let me know. We'll go on to the next part. Page down. All right, we talked about that. And so as we're kind of talking about spiritual practices, I just want to ground us a little bit in terms of spirituality, right? We've heard people say, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual, or I am religious and I'm spiritual, or either or, right? And so what is this spirituality? Is it abstract? Is it concrete? Is there something that I'm missing about it? And so what I have here are several definitions of spirituality. And I just highlighted the parts of those definitions that I really liked, right? Spirituality is the capacity to receive, reflect, and respond to the Spirit of God. It is our conscious awareness of the work of the Spirit in us, right? Spirituality attends to the inner dimensions of ourselves. It turns us toward the inner reality of our humanity. So, as you can hear, as we're talking about spirituality, it is not an up and out moment, but an in and down. And oftentimes we think when we're spiritual, we are to detach from ourselves and reach out to the God that is in the heavens. And I am suggesting that as we're practicing, as we are getting in tune with God, that is an in and down movement, not necessarily an up and out type movement. I heard someone say, we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And that kind of helps us to think that about reorienting ourselves as it relates to our humanity. We are spiritual beings, first, having a human experience. Second, which lets us know that we need to attend to the spirit, our spirit within. So spiritual practices is, I'm reminding of the text in Luke, right? Where Jesus tells his disciples to put out into the deep. You have been fishing for a while. You have not caught anything. And he turns to Peter and says, put out into the deep water. And Peter says, we've been doing this all day, Jesus. We are experts at fishing. This is what we do. But because you say so, because of your word, I'll put out into the deep. And many of you know the story. As they put out into the deep, they caught so many fish that their nets could not contain it. And so as we're thinking about spiritual practices, I am suggesting that this is putting us out into deep. We are inviting ourselves into the deep water of our Lord. And we're inviting ourselves into even the mysteries, right? Because when we think about the ocean and the deep water, there are spaces that are dark that we cannot see, but there are mysteries and things in that water that are renewing and refreshing. And so as we're thinking about spiritual practices, we are inviting ourselves into a deep inward journey towards God. So I am going to give us a moment, because I don't like to just lecture. I like for you to talk back to me. I like for you to share with me your thoughts, any insights you may have along the way, which is why I asked for it to be a Zoom meeting. And so I'm going to give you a moment. If you would like to respond or share in this moment, I'll give you some time to do that now. And please don't be scared. Don't be afraid. Talk to me.
Well, I'll talk if nobody else will. I like your quotation about and I'd heard it before about the way I heard it was we're not human beings trying to be spiritual, but we're spiritual beings trying to be human. And that puts a whole different look at it. And it states, as you stated, that our true essence is spiritual. And that's what fills out our physicality and animates us. So I think you're spot on.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else would like to share? This is a dialogue. I am a teacher, and so I want the participants to dialogue with me as we share together. If not, I'll keep going. And of course, you can stop me along the way. So as we're thinking about spiritual practices, we're thinking in terms of using them as tools to facilitate this journey inward, right? They're tools that we have in our toolbox. And that means we can use a different tool depending on the day, depending on the moment, depending on the crisis we might find ourselves in, depending on the challenges we face in the day, depending on the environment. Listen, I have a 6-year-old who is in virtual school. God help me right now. Virtual school, right? And I may not be able to get the solitude that I need. So I might not be able to practice solitude right now. So I have to figure out something else to practice while he has this active day going on with me. So when we're talking about tools, we're using the tools that best fit us, not the tools that grandmama or even mama give us, or even the pastor. Now, don't get mad at me. My husband's a pastor. But what I'm saying is that there are so many ways that we can get in tune with God. There are so many ways, and so we don't need to get stuck. Spiritual practices are intentional. They are on purpose. It is very difficult to wake up in the morning to say, I'm going to have solitude. And we have not discussed this with anybody in the house. We have not had a conversation, and everybody's got the music blasting and the TV on and the gaming system going. And you have not prepared yourself for this solitude, right? And so we have to be intentional, meaning we have to prepare ahead of time for what we want to experience in our practice. And so let's go on to these 3 elements. You know these elements. You know that in order to engage in a spiritual practice, we need God's Spirit, we need ourself to be present, and we need a practice. And so here I just kind of share some things about each element. And so I'll say some of them because I know some of you are not on the video conference. So what do we know about God's Spirit, right? We know that God's Spirit is dynamic, that it's challenging. And so even as we are doing and employing spiritual practices, hopefully it is stretching us in the way that God's Spirit does, that it's maturing us, right? God's Spirit frees us up. Therefore, we don't have to do a practice out of obligation. We can do a practice out of a choice that we're making to do that practice. God's spirit is fresh. So if the practice is dead and stale, it's time to try something new, right? God's spirit teaches us all things and reminds us and gives us direction. So what we don't want to do is enter a spiritual practice without God's spirit, without inviting God's full spirit to participate in that practice. The second part, right, is the self. We cannot leave ourselves at the door and go in and pray. Nope, we got to bring the whole self into the room. We have to bring the whole self into Lectio Divina. We have to bring the whole self into Sabbath, right? And so ourselves are changing. I hope that you are not the same person you were 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, that you are becoming and shifting and changing. Thus, your spiritual practice may need to mimic where you are, the season of life that you have found yourself in now. You bring all of that with you to your spiritual practice. Our religious affiliation affects how we practice, right? Our culture. I am an African-American woman who has the drum beat in her, who comes from African ancestry. So for me, music is essential to me in getting in tune with my spirit and the spirit of God. And so we don't leave our culture at the door. The other thing I think that is absolutely important is that we bring our traumas and our insecurities with us. So if as a child we were told that we couldn't pray because we had a stutter, and so they asked another child to pray because our stutter was too bad, then when we try to practice prayer, we may have a challenge because that part of us hasn't died. We may remember those things that people said to us as children, and it can impact how we practice now. That's not a bad thing. It's just we need to recognize it kind of thing. We need to recognize that and ask God to heal us from that trauma so that we might practice without the burden of the trauma on us, right? We're not robots. So it is probably not realistic for me to say, I'm going to pray for an hour every day for the next month with a 6-year-old that I have. That's probably not realistic, right? And so, and we're not in the business of making robots, right? We don't want to make spiritual robots. We want people to be embodied human beings. The last thing I say about the self is that the self is human. It's a real person. And I know that sounds simple, but we'll see in the next couple of slides how hard it is for us to even realize that we are human beings that are doing our very best to navigate practices, navigate this religion, our faith, to navigate this world that we live in. And so the last thing we see is the column called practice. And as you can see, there are so many spiritual practices we can engage in: prayer, Lectio Divina, fasting, meditation, Sabbath, silence, solitude, contemplation, simplicity, self-care, care of the earth, journaling, small groups. All of these are spiritual practices that we can indeed engage in. And so, because we have options that can possibly fit where we are in life, who we are in life, our environment, we should be able to find something to explore, to learn more about, and to practice as best we can, to see if it helps us to get in tune with ourselves, but also in tune with our God. I'll stop for a moment here, give us some time to kind of take this in, and then I'll give you an opportunity also to share, to dialogue. Maybe you're practicing some of these now, to share that with us. Maybe you're considering practicing. Maybe there's one that you're saying, hey, I'm kind of concerned about that. I think I might want to try that one. I'm interested in that. That's fine too. And so we can kind of share and talk about that. Okay, you all are very quiet. Listen. All right, I'm gonna keep going until you stop me. All right, so now,
Dr. Woodbury,
yeah, I'm listening.
Woodbury,
Yes.
I apologize. My camera on my phone's not working, so I'm trying to get it on my computer. But I will say this. So in my practices, I've been trying to follow a regimen of self-mastery, action, and relationships. And so I'm looking at this framework here, and I'm trying to, where would you put self-mastery, action, and relationships? Because how I see it is, I'm sorry, I've got 6-year-olds in the background screaming myself. So with that self-mastery, I'm looking at God's Spirit. Would this be something that I would reflect on, saying that maybe God's Spirit this is where I'm forming my self-mastery?
It could be that. I think it's in all of them. Self-mastery, and it's trying to get to know self, but you can't get to know self without God's Spirit helping to reveal self to you, right? And so I think it's actually in probably mostly God's Spirit and the self, right? And you can probably gain insight into self-mastery through these practices as well. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Anybody else? That was a good question.
I was just thinking about these religious practices, these spiritual practices, and you've got down here at the very bottom, and more. And I was just thinking about other things that might be good spiritual practices.
Please share.
And I was thinking about reading. I've been doing a lot of reading lately, and reading a good book, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, it can stimulate our thinking and can be a spiritual practice. And then things like listening to or playing music or performing music or singing is definitely a spiritual one that I miss now that COVID is here. And then just exercising, just going for a walk or doing things. Walking is a very good spiritual exercise, I've found. Absolutely. And really, I find it harder the more I think about it, that almost everything we do can be, if we really are conscious of it, a spiritual exercise, if we think about it in terms of our relationship to the Spirit.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you said that. I used to think that I needed to, when you're growing up and you're going to Sunday school and Bible study and church on Sunday, you hear the pastor say, you got to read your word, you got to read the Bible. And so I tried to, do the Bible in a year. Some of us have tried that, do that whole devotional. Then I thought, let me go get the daily bread. Okay. Nope. Let me go get, I had all kinds of devotionals with me. Not that those are bad things, but I wasn't getting it. But when I started to read books that I had from seminary, books that are from, scholars who are talking about Black suffering, or scholars that are talking about Black women, or things of that sort, I began to my spirit was being fed, and I was moving into contemplation, because reading some of these works make me think. So I have to stop for a moment to digest what I've read and contemplate, what does that mean for me, right? And so it is similar to this process that happens with Lectio Divina, with those four steps that what is it saying? What is it saying to me today? What can I say back to God about what it's saying, right? And so what is it calling me to do? Because after contemplation, there's this action that should happen, or something that it moves us or invites us to do and be. And so I started to just think that maybe we like to say that the spiritual readings and the readings that have the Bible in it and scripture in it are the only things, but it's not, because God is bigger than that. And I'm not saying, I don't want anybody to get mad with me and saying I'm putting the Bible in the trash. I am not putting the Bible in the trash. It's on the table like the other books. But I think it's time for us to begin to recognize that we can see God in other ways. Like you said, my grandmother, rest her soul, she loved the dirt. She enjoyed gardening. She enjoyed having her fingers in the ground and feeling the earth and planting seeds. For her, that was her time where she communed with God. She thanked God for the ability to be able to still do that, the fruit that's going to come from the ground after she plants. And so she contemplated and prayed. And sometimes I could hear her singing, right? So all of these things are happening. And we might say she's just gardening, but I'm saying she's practicing, she's gardening as a spiritual practice, as you just said, Jack. And so I'm glad that you just even mentioned that. So even for us on this call, as you are, trying to find ways to employ a practice, it could be that you're already doing it and you don't even know it. You're already employing something, and you're because it doesn't look a particular way, or because the pastor or leader hasn't said those things, we may not think that it's a spiritual practice, but it is. If it's getting you in tune with God's spirit, if it's getting you in tune with your spirit, and it is challenging you and changing you, I believe that it could be a practice. So now I'm going to ask a question. Do you take Sabbath? I'm going to ask that. You can answer in the chat. You can answer out loud. Do you take Sabbath? And I don't want to know if you go to church on Sunday. Nope. That's not the same thing all the time. I'm asking, do you take Sabbath? Do you take Sabbath? I'm wondering what the people are saying. Come on, anybody, talk back to me. I'll tell you mine. It depends. That's my answer. It depends. And that's not necessarily a good answer. But look, I have to be honest. I'm not going to lie to you and make it sound good. No. It really depends. And I need to do a better job. I'll just be honest.
Well, I was just going to say the same thing that you just said, Doctor. My pastor stresses having a Sabbath, and my pastor takes a Sabbath. It's not on Sunday because that's a work day for him, but he just takes a day, maybe Monday, where he turns off the TV, turns off the computer, doesn't take phone calls, and he's just rests on the Sabbath day. And I thought, that's pretty cool. And I should do that, because sometimes Sunday I'm busy as all get out. I go to Sunday morning seminary, and then I got another group I listen to, and I'm going here, there, and yon. And, the guy who's not enjoying the Sabbath on Sunday morning is the fellow in the congregation who's got a notebook under his arm, who's trying to make sure everything comes off as it's supposed to. But I think that's really important, to take a day and just rest in the Spirit, rest in God's presence, and just free ourselves from worry, and just be alive in the presence of God, and without all these interruptions and it's hard to do many times. I'm like you. It depends, but it depends. I need to work on that. And I think that's an important practice.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that you mentioned it. And you said that you too need to work on it, because that's what we're going to talk about. I think that we are in the times where Sabbath and rest are so essential to our survival, to our mental, emotional, and spiritual health. And I could have picked any other practice to kind of explore and dig deeper, but the Spirit was calling me to this, calling me to Sabbath, because we need to have this conversation. So I remember as a kid going to church Sunday morning. You remember the saying, remember the Sabbath, keep it holy. So, I always thought Sabbath was on Sunday, but it never felt like it, because we get up extra early. I'd have to get dressed in something that was very uncomfortable, stockings and stuff like that. And we get to church and have to go to Sunday school. We'd skip breakfast, and then we go to worship service, which was 2 hours. And yet I'm still in this uncomfortable attire. My parents are singing in the choir and being the deacon, and they're looking at me, be quiet. You can't eat this candy in this church, and you can't talk, and you stop chewing gum. And here's my finger. This is my mom talking to me from the choir stand, right? Again, this is supposed to be Sabbath. Service is over. I'm thinking we're going to eat and go home so I can go play. Nope. We got Baptist Training Union, and we have a ministry meeting over here, and I'm still hungry, right? I'm a kid that's hungry. So once we're done with ministry meetings and Baptist Training Union, Then we go to eat. Well, every other church is at the restaurant eating. So everybody's standing in line at the Piccadilly trying to get a plate. I'm uncomfortable in my clothes. I've been up since 7. I have not had a good time at all. This is not how Sabbath is supposed to be for me as a kid, right? My parents are tired, so they couldn't be resting either, right? And then finally, by the time, we get home, it's 3-4 o'clock. But again, remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. And I'm like, nope, I don't want to remember that kind of Sabbath. That's not the one I want to do. And some of us have that kind of Sabbath in mind. And for many church leaders, I'll just be honest with you. Sunday is not your Sabbath. Stop making it. Stop pretending. Sunday, if you are a church leader or a pastor, let it go. Saturday is not your Sabbath either, because you are preparing for Sunday. So for so many pastors, their Sabbath is that Monday, that they get to rest on that Monday. But if that's not your thing, then pick another day, but definitely do not pick Sunday. I used to be the executive minister of business for a church in Richmond. And the pastor of the church was also the mayor of the city at the time. We were involved in a multi-million-dollar a building project. And of course, as the minister of business, I'm in charge of keeping the lights on, making sure, all these things happen, on Sunday morning. And I was asked, would you like to come to worship? And I said, well, worship is work for me, because as I'm sitting in the sanctuary, I'm worried about why that light bulb is out. Now I got to put that on my to-do list. I'm worried about why the Wi-Fi is not working. So now I got to call Verizon. So for people who are in leadership in the church, Sunday is not your day of rest. It is your day of hardcore work. You go in hard on Sunday so that you might rest on Monday. And so I invite you as a church leader, as a deacon, as a trustee, as a Sunday school teacher, because even if you're a Sunday school teacher and you say, that's all I do. Yeah, but you had to prepare on Saturday. You had to get ready. And then on Sunday, you had to navigate any challenges you had as you were teaching. You're working, right? And so as we are thinking about Sabbath, we need to think about that day. We need to have in mind what is the best day for us. And that may not be a Sunday. And so why practice Sabbath? So here's another exercise. I want you to give yourself 1 point for every statement that applies to you. We are socialized for work and business. We lack sufficient rest. We're bombarded with too much information. We need balance between work and rest. We are exhausted mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally. We place too much value on doing. We are perfectionists. I can just give myself 10 points right there. We are perfectionists, list-driven overachievers. We are experiencing burnout. We are constantly proving our worth and value. And then God rested, so we are not higher than God. Who got 10 points? I know I did. I got more than 10, right? Let me see. Anybody else? Right. Okay. Listen, this is why we practice Sabbath. Everything on this list is the reason why we practice Sabbath. And the ultimate reason is that if we believe we are not a little God running around here, then we also believe that if God rested, we should also do the same thing. So let's just talk about it. And then we're going to go into some steps we can take to actually practice Sabbath. It is 9:30, so we have good time. Okay. Sabbath is to cease, to stop doing whatever we're doing. It is a rhythm of rest. And it is a radical choice, right? Because in a world where we are called to constantly produce, it says no. For this moment in time, I will not produce. It's radical also because as we're thinking about in a world where our ancestors did not rest, it is resistance to oppression and depression and any powers that say the privileged get the rest and the underprivileged and the marginalized must continue to work, right? It's intentional and it's a conscious decision, and it is necessary to be healthy and to heal if we are not healthy. Sabbath is hard. Now, I was reading, it just blew me away. I was reading Soul Feast, and I have some resources at the end that I'll give you. And in it, the authors suggest that Sabbath comes first and then work. And it's proven in Genesis 1. So the first day of the week begins the day before at sundown. It says evening, then morning, the first day. And then it says evening, then morning, the second day, which would suggest that Sabbath happens before we work. And so the author of Soul Feast would say that the day winds down, we wind down and prepare to rest. While God is still working, God is still preparing, God is still creating. And then the next morning, we wake up to join God in what God is doing in creation. Not we do and let God join us, right? And so as we're thinking about Sabbath, the Genesis story, the creation story would suggest it happens before we work, right? And so as we are considering the ways we are to cease and stop, we have to think in terms of our Sabbath. If we choose Sabbath on Monday, then it needs to begin the night before. It needs to begin somewhere as we are preparing to go to sleep, to enter into Sabbath rest, so that the next day we might enjoy the Sabbath day. So before we practice Sabbath, so I'm gonna give you some tools, but before we even get there, before we can even say tomorrow is my Sabbath, we have to make a conscious decision, because the moment you say you are going to rest, I am telling you right now, everything in the world that could come to you to make you work is going to come your way. So just get ready. It is just the nature of the universe. The moment, it's kind of like you call to preach. The moment you say yes to the Lord, all kinds of challenges start to happen. The moment you walk down the aisle during the invitation, all kinds of things start to come your way. Once you make a decision in your heart and mind to move in a particular direction, know that there are things that will come against that, but we have to commit. The other thing is that we have to take an honest inventory of what needs to shift in us, what mindsets need to shift so that we might experience Sabbath. What needs to change in us? And I have a slide about the mindsets, because sometimes we have to begin to think in terms of not pleasing people, but choosing ourselves. And we have to give ourselves permission to choose ourselves. We don't always do that because we're so used to choosing others. And so I'm saying sometimes we have to consider how to do that. Also, what boundaries do we need to establish so that we might experience a Sabbath? Meaning Sabbath doesn't mean you can call me anyway. It doesn't. And I have a friend who takes Sabbath every Friday. She's a pastor of a church. She has her phone set where during the regular week, she has her phone set where it does not ring or any notifications come in until after 10 o'clock. She cannot get herself together and deal with that before 10. So she has that. But the other thing she does is that she takes a Sabbath on Friday. Her family prepares for that on Thursday. And so that's how she does it. The other thing is, before you practice Sabbath, we need a trusted friend, somebody that can gently hold us accountable. Not a friend that's going to beat us down. We have enough of those. We need friends who can gently help us. And then we need to know that it's okay to take baby steps. That means maybe right now it's not the time for you to take a 24-hour Sabbath. You might not have that time, but maybe you can take small Sabbaths throughout the day. Maybe you can take 1 to 2 hours a week or 30 minutes a week. And so baby steps are what's important. So here's what we do when we take Sabbath. When we say I'm going to practice Sabbath for the next hour, the first thing we're doing is that we are stopping. We are stopping. We are stopping. And so we welcome God being God. We stop the stuff that we are doing. We stop the unfinished projects, the unfinished to-do list, the unfinished clothes, the unfinished dishes that are in the dishwasher. We stop. We stop. That's hard for doers. It's hard for perfectionists and overachievers who live by the to-do list. We rest from our ordinary work. And that means we do not pick up somebody else's ordinary work. So just because you're not doing your work doesn't mean you need to take on Sister So-and-so's project. No, because that's her work. You need to rest from work, from exhaustion, from hurriedness, from catching up on errands. So this is not a time for you to write your to-do list, because that's work. It's not a time for you to go run to the Target, because that's work. Right? It's truly getting ourselves in a place of rest. I know it's hard. Even as I was doing research on it, I was just saying to myself, I'm going to fail this part. Right. All right. So before we even move to the last two of practicing Sabbath, I just want to hear from you. Are you saying to yourself, she must be crazy? This is not possible. Talk to me. What do y'all think? Are you all doing this already? And so you got it down pat? You are an expert at Sabbath rest? Or are you struggling? Go ahead.
Hi, this is Chandra. I was with you. I tried to prepare what the pandemic has helped me with my Sabbath in terms of rest and seeing the need and value for rest. So Sundays are my Sabbath. And so I was like, I thought I was doing a good thing. Like, okay, this is the day I get to care for self, go outside and everything. I like, that's my little errand day because, I enjoy like to go shopping. But now just after listening to you, I'm like, ooh, she said no Target. Wait. I was like, oh, right. Wait a minute, and then not picking up other people's stuff because that's when everyone calls you. So I'm halfway there. I'm glad to see like, okay, I really need to kind of just prepare and take it up to the next notch and how I could be more effective with my time during the week. So I necessarily don't have to do a lot of stuff on Sundays and, here and just work a little smarter. But this is very helpful to me.
Good. I was reading something, and as the author was, as he was sharing this rest, he said that because he's so prone to using this free day as a day to catch up on things, he has realized that if he wants to keep it as Sabbath, he needs to pick another day to do all of these things. That way, he doesn't feel as though he's going to be behind. He has 2 days, one that he's going to focus on getting all these tasks done, and the other he can rest because he already has another day designated for the errands, designated for Sister Jenkins' project, designated for other meetings. And so this is important, right? Because we haven't really learned how to rest, right? Because resting also means resting from making decisions. This is not the day to have the hard conversation. Nope. It's not the day to have the conversation with the teenage daughter, not the day to have the conversation with the mother, not the day to have the conversation with the husband. No, because that's not rest. That's work, right? And so as we're thinking about what we're resting from decision-making. We're resting from, sometimes we have to rest from technology. If you are a gadgets person, you have to put that down, right? And so as we're thinking about rest, it gives us a different perspective of what rest is. It's not just simply laying down. That's not necessarily rest. And it's not just simply laying down with your to-do list in your hand, right? Because even though you might not be physically doing something, you're mentally doing something. And I'll tell you what you're not doing. You're probably not having a conversation with the Lord about what you should be doing, right? You're probably not saying, Lord, this is my Sabbath. Teach me how to do it. Teach me how to enter into this space in a way that really helps me to be refreshed and renewed. And at the end of the day, that's what we want. We want the Sabbath day to not feel like all the other days. We want it to feel like a day that we really need and that we are looking forward to, kind of like a vacation, right? Many of us, we put the vacation on the calendar because psychologically, we need to know we're looking forward to something in order to keep getting through the hard days that we have. And so it's the same with Sabbath. If I know that my Sabbath is coming, I might be able to push a little bit on Tuesday and Wednesday because my Sabbath is coming on Thursday, and I can just kind of let it all go. The other thing about resting is that it really is a matter of trust. trusting that the world is not going to fall apart because we're not doing, trusting that even while we're resting, God is working. God is working. That I think that sometimes we have these lists, we have these things we have to do, and we think that if we don't get them done now, they won't get done, or it'll put us so far behind. But I'm sure many of you can testify to times when you thought you were going to be behind, and somehow God has increased the time somehow. That meeting that was on Friday was actually moved to the following Tuesday. So now you have more time, right? That maybe the meeting was even canceled. Maybe, these things that you had on your list, you finished them so fast that now you have this time to get the thing done that you thought that you had to sacrifice Sabbath for. The other thing is delight, right? And this is thinking about taking time to do the things that gives us joy and pleasure. Now, I know as Christians, we struggle with this word pleasure because we think that pleasure means this reckless living, this doing what you want, how you want, where you want. No, but I don't believe that God is leading us into a life that does not have pleasure. What kind of life is that? That's not the abundant life, right? And so delight in the things that you enjoy. One of the things the author of Soul Feast said was take time to see yourself. Listen, week after week, we rush by ourselves. We do. In the morning, we rush by ourselves on the way out the door. We don't know what we look like, really. We don't know if we have a wrinkle over our eye, a wrinkle under our nose. We just rush past ourselves. And we do that with the people that we love. We rush past our husbands and wives and partners. We rush past our kids. We just rush. But on Sabbath, it's okay to stop and take a look at yourself in the mirror. Stop. And the author talks about usually when he washes his hands, he washes them so fast that he can't even remember if the water was hot or cold. But he says on Sabbath, he takes his time. He turns the water to hot and he slows down long enough to feel the warm water run over his hands. Now that is powerful, right? Because that means on any other day, he doesn't even know if the water's hot or cold. It's just there. The last thing about Sabbath, I think that is especially important is that it's a time to contemplate, to be still and contemplate, to think about our joys, even our sorrows, to consider the ways the Lord has helped us to grow, maybe to contemplate on a song or to sing a song as Jack mentioned, right? Maybe there was a picture that spoke to you to think about that. The options are endless on what we can contemplate as it relates to our Sabbath. So I have homework for you because it's 9:47. So I want to give you your homework before we end because I want to open this up in case you have any questions or concerns or burning insights. My homework assignment for you, and I am hoping that you will come back and meet with me next week, same time, that you might carve out at least 1 to 2 hours of uninterrupted time this week to practice Sabbath. I'm only asking for 1 to 2 hours. If you can do it, if you can say, I can only do 30 minutes, then do what you can, that you might give yourself permission to focus on you and God because you deserve that. And before you carve out this time, think about what you need to do to pull away from the busyness. What 2 things will you do these 1 to 2 hours that will refresh you and renew you? And then consider the experience. What was it like? Was it hard? Was it really challenging to pull away from stuff? Or was it easy? Did you find yourself being able to do it easier than you thought? Because that's what's important, right? So as we are getting ready to close out, and I'll give you some time to ask questions. I love this quote by Mueller. He says, Sabbath is to surrender. If we refuse to rest until we are finished, we will never rest until we die. Sabbath dissolves the artificial urgency of our days because it liberates us from the need to be finished. So I'll give you some time to share if you would like to share, to ask questions if you have those. And then we will see each other again next week. If there is a particular practice that you say, hey, I want to know more about that, I'll do my best to share some insights about that practice next week. I do not know what I might share next week. I am trying to give God's Spirit time to speak to me so that I know what you might need next week. If not, I will let you log out. You will not be hurting my feelings if you log out. I'll check the chat as well. See if there's anything in there. Yes, Lord, resting is hard. Absolutely. So you are free to log out. You're free to share and unmute yourselves.
No, I was just going to say that sometimes, to me, I think it's been inbred in most of us that we need to be busy and we need to be doing things. And if we're just sitting there not doing anything, we almost feel guilty about it. And it's just sort of, it's like the work ethic that we've all been, my father told me to work hard, be a hard worker and work hard in school, work hard. And so I've just retired and after a long career, and I was busy all day long doing the work that I did. And then to be retired now is quite a shock. And I'm looking, and I've been told by people that when you retire, you don't want to just sit at a lump on the couch and do nothing. That'll kill you. But find things to do. And so I'm busier now than I was when I was working. But I'm doing things like playing softball and doing things like that I enjoy doing. That's what or new things that I'm trying to learn how to do. And now that I don't have to do my job full time. But I even think there's a danger in that because I'm constantly on the go and I need to rest and and I appreciate your reminding me of that. And I'm going to do my homework.
Absolutely. That's good. And I think that, as we are entering new seasons in life, we find new ways to not just but to enjoy and to be useful and to stay active and stay engaged and connected. My mother worked like that, and now she rests. I think she rests too much, but she rests a lot because of the work that was put on her while she was working was just so much emotionally that she's resting more now. But I think that you're right. Our culture, it's terrible as it relates to our work ethic. But the other thing I was going to say is I don't want to raise a child who says to his friends, I never saw my mother rest. I've never seen her take a break. She was always doing something. I want to raise a child that says, my mom, she took Sabbath. She sat down. She took vacation. She rested. She had a Sabbath day. She had a Sabbath, right? I want him to get that. The other thing is my husband, he's the pastor of Metropolitan, but he takes Sabbath like your pastor, but he also has the church take Sabbath because you teach the church how to rest, right? You want to teach them how to care for themselves. You want to teach the church members how to refresh and renew. You don't want to teach them that ministry is a 24/7, 7 days a week type job, because it also suggests, where does God fit into that? Where does God get to work if you're doing all of it, right? When do we allow God the space for God to move and work when we have taken on the role of working all the time? So I think, as we are considering Sabbath, know that people are watching us. People are watching us. They're doing not what we say, but what we do, right? And if we keep doing work, that's what they think they will have to do. And so we will be raising children, the next generation of workaholics. Is that what we want? No, that's not what we really want. We want to raise the next generation of people who have balance, right? And to be quite honest, right, we know that when we rest, we wake up refreshed. We wake up with new insights, new understanding, revelation. I used to, when I would write my sermons, I used to stay up all night to write sermons. I thought that was what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to work real hard on the sermon, but it was exhausting me. And God is so good that when I decided to go to sleep, finally, God was able to give me revelation. And so I could get up early in the morning and write more and better than when I did when I was trying to stay up all night to do it. So it's just a testament to the fact that we need to rest. Our bodies need the rest. And if we're going to heal, not only emotionally, but physically, if we're going to heal, we've got to rest. Like when you have surgery and you don't do the thing that the doctor tells you to do, which is rest, you got to go back and have the surgery again. That's because we didn't follow the instructions to rest. And so I think it's hard, but also very necessary for our thriving, flourishing, and our surviving. Anybody else want to share? Okay, if not, it is 9:55. You have a 10 o'clock service. You got 5 minutes to hop on that interstate and get there, or hop on that Zoom call. Hopefully I will see you next week, and that you get to share next week some of your experience with Sabbath, if you desire to do that. And we will have a fresh wind of fresh ideas about our spiritual practices next week at 9 o'clock.